Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Women in Synthetic Biology panel discussion. We really appreciate everybody taking their time to come join us today. My name is Terry Shea Newton. I'm an IP partner at Mintz Levin, and I do a lot of synthetic biology patent law. But I'm really honored today to be joined on the panel by three very special and talented women. Frances Arnold, Linus Pauling Professor of Chemical Engineering at Caltech, Nobel Prize winner in chemistry for directed evolution last year. And then to Frances's left, Una Ryan, investor, artist, professor. And then last but not least, Rosalind Franklin, who is a coach and consultant to nonprofit organizations. So thought it'd be helpful for us to just start the discussion by having each one of the speakers talk a little bit about themselves, their career, what they do now, and just to set the stage for future questions that we're going to be discussing on the panel. So, Frances, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Terry. It's great to see a lot of women here. I'd actually like to know, are you all scientists? Who's not a scientist? All right, so it's a nice mixture. I have degrees in engineering. I started off as a mechanical and aerospace engineer working in early days of solar energy. Then we had a change of administration. This was 1980. Reagan was elected, and it was clear that solar energy was not going to go anywhere for a while. So I was young enough to switch fields, and I became a chemical engineer at the beginning of the DNA revolution. And that offered me the chance to think about rewriting the code of life right at the beginning of that capability. So I became a chemical engineer. I'd done a few other things before that, flopping around with different jobs, but I found what I really liked to do in graduate school. I've been accused of practicing chemistry without a license, which I happily do. We all practice biology, right? So it's a wide open world. I've been at Caltech for almost 33 years, but professors can do anything they want, which is really a great job. I really love that. So I've been involved in the startup scene for most of that time. One of the big early successes out of directed evolution was a company called Maxigen, which went public at the dot-com bubble. It was a lot of fun. Stock went like that, and then immediately went like that. That was less fun, but I didn't give up my day job, thank goodness. Since then, I've gone on to co-found Gevo. They're actually still in business, which is amazing, because nobody seems to make money in this business of making biofuels. Provivi is a recent startup as well in the agricultural space. And most recently, Arales Bio, and whose CEO is sitting right here, Tina Beauville. I think of myself mainly as a scientist, and I encourage young people to develop lots of great ideas, which we can then see go out into the space. So it's lovely to meet you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here too, and honestly, I can only see women out there, so that's even better. Well, I was certainly around at the beginning, though we didn't really call it synthetic biology. Francis Crick was a very good friend of mine when I was at Cambridge, and I was doing my PhD, and that was on circadian rhythms. And after Cambridge, I went into academic research, and I said something bad. And that was very exciting. Those were the days when we didn't really know what endothelium, the lining of blood vessels, did. And I was lucky enough to be able to localize an enzyme that controls blood pressure on the lining of endothelial cells, and that led to the development of the ACE inhibitors, a very important class of antihypertensive drugs. But I did not do the development and launch. I was just doing academic research. And that convinced me that I wanted to go into the industry and sort of completely equation and bring things that were useful to people, because that sort of fulfilled a childhood dream of mine. So I actually went into a Fortune 500 company, hated the blockbuster mentality, but actually that was a little ironic because I later helped develop one, but wanted to go, you know, a few $100 million seemed fine to me for a nice drug development story. So I went in as the chief scientific officer into the biotech industry, became a CEO through a series of accidents, really, and ended up running biotech companies, largely public ones, some private and some non-profits. And at that stage of my life was more into immunotherapies and wanted to develop inexpensive therapeutics, vaccines, diagnostics, and moved a lot into global health and developing world products. Now that I'm in San Francisco, I would describe myself as an investor and an artist. And those two don't really seem to go together very well. But as you listen to this whole rigmarole of my life, the thread has been synthetic biology, whether it was called that at the time. So translating science into medicines, into money, though that just happens, and now into art has been what I've been doing, and synthetic biology is the glue that's held it all together.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon at this point. So I'm here on this panel at a completely different end of the spectrum. I will say right off that I'm the namesake of Dr. Rosalind Elsie Franklin, who was one of the discoverers of DNA, who contributed to the discovery, and her name has been inextricably linked to that through Watson's coverage of her in different ways, ways that he's portrayed her over the years. That is not my world. I started off my life as a musician. I didn't have the direction of knowing exactly what I was going to do with my life, but I'm a musician. I built a symphony orchestra. I co-founded a symphony orchestra. I was a harpist in my first iteration, and co-founded an award-winning orchestra, which was fascinating, delivering a sort of community, an artistic product that was of very high caliber to a community that never had anything like that. So that was very exciting. It's called the California Symphony. It was in the East Bay, still exists today. And we built that up over the years and launched many young artists and did things a little differently. So that was how I started. But through all that, I really enjoyed the people part of it. So I built the board, I built the events, I sort of created the sort of the fundraising arms and all the social parts of it, which then led into sort of leadership development work, and then sort of, you know, circuitous route to what I'm doing now, which is a sort of consultant to nonprofits, as well as a coach. But one of my sort of other things is because people take themselves wherever they go. It's sort of like, you know, we are who we are. Whatever we like, even if we'd like to think we're not, we are. And so I sort of take that into the world of sort of parents of children in crisis. So I work with a lot of parents whose children are in wilderness or treatment programs, and I take them on a parallel journey, so that, you know, they think, oh, send the kid off and, you know, they'll get better and then everything will be fine. The family system is not fine. So I work with the family system, the parents themselves, to sort of bring a holistic approach. And I'm fortunate in this way to be able to sit on a panel with such remarkable women and speak about, sort of try and put my aunt's legacy, which I take very seriously as a family member, because she's a human being and a person and an aunt, not some sort of iconic figure that she gets portrayed as, sometimes sort of rallying for the feminine cry. So I like to put sort of life and realism back into that. So thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. So let's start with your observations about synthetic biology. How have you seen it evolve over the years? And where do you see it going in the future? Anybody?
got the CEO here. Well, of course, we've been in this field since well before it was called synthetic biology. But the idea that you could use biology and reprogram biology really came out of discoveries in the last century, at the end of the last century. Seems so long ago. We went from dreaming things and maybe putting a few genes together to modify metabolic pathways. So I was deeply involved in what we called metabolic engineering. I'm a protein engineer by interest, so I'm the parts lady in this whole business. I attended the first SynBio conference at the very beginning and said, well, it's going to be hard to program biology. Don't think of it like you think of all the other engineering systems. Probably standardized parts is a bit simplistic, but we should be able to program it. And it's very gratifying to sit here and come to this meeting and see where everyone has taken the field. So I saw it move slowly for about 15 years, and then boom, what's taking off? The real world applications. We academics can sit there and talk about it all you want and write nice papers about it, but it's not useful until you get it out into people's hands. The definition of useful is people use it. And that's what's happening now. So that's the transition that I'm so happy to see with all the hard work and creativity. And it's not just the science, obviously. There's a whole lot of business know-how. There's art, there's application, there's so much that goes into it that takes a huge team effort to do. So I love this transition.
I mean, I think it's really exciting too. I was there for the first meeting where wonderful John Cumbers, to whom we owe all of this, put it together, and he was trying to get us to encourage me to bring friends, you know, so there'd be people at the meeting, and now you can't fight your way, and we had to move from Mission Bay. But, and I really think it's become a culture. There's absolutely nothing technologically that synthetic biology can't get into and can't improve now. But with all very powerful new technologies, there's always a watch out. And I think the thing that concerns me as I look at some other new technologies, like, say, AI, I can honestly see a way, even though it hasn't been done, that AI could find an algorithm for ethicism. I mean, even if it built in some of our biases. But as I look at the sort of ethical concerns that we have about some synthetic biology, I worry that biology itself has such wonderful controls and feedback loops so that populations don't outstrip their food source and things like that. But of course, what we've done with modern medicine and modern synthetic biology is overcome all those constraints. And we no longer really worry about having the perfect DNA for our species to go on. We're all celebrating individuality, and that's what we all value. And in many cases, we've overcome the natural controls. So what I think is we're going to have to be very, very careful and sensible and thoughtful, which will require women, to think what the regulations and the laws that govern our synthetic biology world will be. So that's my watch out for where it's evolved to.
Really?
Yes.
I'm going to move in a different direction, though, because synthetic biology is not where I know where the future is going for me in terms of anything I can add. But I was going to pick up on your strain of the ethics. I mean, ethics is a strain that runs through whatever we do, wherever we go. And I don't think that if the ethics of Watson had been ethical, I'd be sitting here today talking about my aunt. So I think that's a big piece. It's sort of, it's not the woman, it was the treatment of the woman. It was somebody who, Crick was a good friend of Rosalind's too. And I think they...
And Jim Watson was not my friend.
Okay, well just, thanks for the clarification. I like you better now. but I think that there is that piece of it that when I try and speak about what do I want, what is the message I want to give? It's how we want to behave and how we are with each other and how we treat each other. So it's not just societally in the very large, huge way that the biology works. It's on the human level as well. And so that I just wanted to add that piece because I think that's important.
Great.
Right, thank you. So, we're sort of united in our interest in promoting women in synthetic biology. And so there's scientists, there's inventors, there's investors, CEOs. But I think when I talk with other women in this field, one question resonates frequently, and that's why aren't there more women CEOs, founders, investors in synthetic biology? Are there certain challenges that we should be aware of, or for people starting off or who are making their way through, that they should be aware of?
CEO gets to.
Well, now I'm an investor, and I invest in startups, and they are women-led or women-founded. So I won't say I haven't invested in companies that have men in them, because men sometimes have good ideas too. And but I think the important thing is to give women the boost they need. So as we mentor, advise, and help, I don't think it needs to be formal. I think we need just to be very kind to each other and help each other. And I think it's going to happen. I mean, as more and more people look at this room, are in the industry, they're going to rise up in their companies, and there will be more CEOs, there will be more leadership. And come on, I mean, if you think about the 7 mitochondrial mothers we had, and look at the population of the world now, we surely can populate the heads of companies. So I actually feel very positive about where things are going. So, the academic?
Well, I've started a bunch of companies, and most of them were started by men because mostly the men were there. But when the women are there, they can do a great job. So first of all, we have to get the word out that starting companies is great, that running companies is great, and that women can succeed just as well. So why aren't the numbers as large as they are? I'm not sure. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, because it's highly competitive. You have to be willing to have those sharp elbows and push aside when you need to. You need the network that makes it possible. You need to be able to take risks at a time of life when, boy, everything else is risky too. Maybe we don't have the support systems that other people have. I don't know. I'd love to hear what we can do. My job as an academic is just to say, you can do it. I don't have to do it, right? I say, you do it. But I see success all around me when that happens. I don't see women failing any more frequently, and perhaps less frequently than the men do. And the price of failure, when it's not so high, means that you're willing to take that risk. So do you feel that women pay a higher price for failure? Do you feel that women don't want to fail? What are the issues that make this so hard? Because, I mean, you're the ones who are doing it. We're just up here talking about it.
And it's a group discussion too, so
Yeah.
feel free to.
I mean, I think the issue of mentoring is huge, and people from above pulling you up, and networking, the whole networking thing. I mean, I'll give an example without naming any names, but I have a male co-founder, and we've been talking pretty naked, and we have potential really big investors that we've been introduced to, and he said, well, you might want to hook up with them, but it's like 4 guys and they're on a golfing outing, and I don't play golf. I would be a fifth wheel. It would be really weird. If he were here, he'd probably be out on the golf course with
Yeah. But not all men play golf, right?
No, but I'm just saying it's a network of
Yeah.
people that have relationships
Yeah.
that have been formed socially through a walk.
That you feel comfortable with, that you can socialize
But
with.
women
Yeah.
have to really work and form those relationships among men and women, and just kind of get into that. And this goes all the way down to when you're in school. I've been on a lot of panels about women in science and trying to bring up the next generation. And the one thing that has been targeted as the most important thing is to have good mentors and people that will go to bat for you, whether they're male or female.
Are you creating that for your?
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to pitch to me, it's over coffee or maybe a glass of wine, but not on the golf course. But at this point, I want to put in a good word for Terry, who ran a program last week on mentoring. And it's something that you're very fortunate if you're in the Bay Area, and I think also in the other big hubs. People are very generous with their time, and they will give advice. I mean, I don't charge, I invest. It's the opposite. I pay to hear about what's going on and sit on a few boards. But I think this is what we have to do, lead by example. I'm often invited to sit on boards, and I'm on 6, I can't do any more. But I always recommend, if I can, another woman who's in the area. The same when people ask, do you know somebody who can be a general counsel for my startup or whatever? I always try to recommend people of diversity, people with unusual backgrounds, and of course my own circle of other women. So I think we all have to take this on. You don't have to be an official coach and mentor to help other women make it. But you probably have a professional view.
Very professional. No, I think sort of the women step into roles also with much more. They feel they have to have much more knowledge. I mean, that sort of studies show that the men will take a job at 20% of knowledge, and a woman will wait till 80% before they even apply. So, I mean, a part of that little bit is how we bring our own selves right to it. Professional side of how we bring out, but there is this, and I think sort of sometimes mentoring is it's an amazing thing when you have amazing mentors, and it's not always that. So I think it's also being judicious about who you have and moving around if necessary, because that's a part of it. But I just think that also it's not about the lean in, because I'm totally opposed to all of that, and that's sort of gone past. But I think it's really owning the fact that you can, and I think that when it goes, take it back to my aunt again, she just did her thing. She had the confidence. People sort of say that she was so sort of feminist and pushing through. I look back at her family history. I was giving a talk about sort of where she came from and how she thought feminine sort of the side of it. Her whole family were women who were educated, who went to school. She didn't think there was anything strange about being capable and accomplished and unapologetic. And I think that's a huge piece of it, being unapologetic for being successful, being smart, and then not tolerating, she was called all the names that want someone to call her, but really it was, don't mess with me, I'm doing a job. And I don't, we sort of, women like to please, and we sort of want to make everybody comfortable. She didn't suffer from that gene, I don't think. And so, she just sort of did her thing, and then was called names about it, but she didn't feel wronged. I think this is really important. She never felt that she was pushed aside. She didn't feel she was wronged. If she'd known that they had used her data to make the discovery, she would have been furious, but because it would have been unjust. Not because she was a woman, not because she felt she would have been treated badly. She would have felt that's unethical, it's the wrong thing to do, and that she wouldn't have tolerated. And I think it's a framing of things that we can construct to make it one way, and yet we can come from a place of strength. And I think that's what I would add.
I have one other thing to add. Beside the mentorship, women also need sponsorship. I have been to workplaces and I have seen how, in the same workplace, how the doors were open for male colleagues where the same thing was not happening to women. But if any of the women who is in a position open one door. You don't have to open many doors, just one. Is for one woman, that's enough because the next one will open one door and the next one will open one door. So woman needs a lot of sponsorship too.
I absolutely agree. And don't forget that men can be both mentors and sponsors, so we have to bring them into this discussion too.
Christina?
I think it's interesting how you're saying, like, yeah, we should open doors, and you were saying, like, we should be, like, confident to go through them. I think there's just, like, something else in the saying, though, too, we're talking about, like, there's, yeah, like, people aren't opening doors for women. It's not just that women aren't applying, like, because they don't have all the knowledge, it's that, like, you actually, like, women need to be better to be seen equally as competent as the men, right? So, like, I think, like, I don't feel like I have imposter syndrome. Like, I don't feel like I'm like, because I look around and I see all these like idiot blowhards, like, you know, like,
I know more than you.
I know so much more than you. Like, what are you doing? Like, and like, how do you like that unearned confidence in the blowhards? Like, that's what we need to stop, right? Like,
Here, here.
how can we? I don't know. Like, how do we do that? Like, how do we open the doors for the women who don't, yeah, who do need that extra push? But how do we also like calibrate, I guess, like what we think of as competence, like, because I think like that unearned confidence of certain types of people, like, it opens those doors that I like are
Maybe all together as holistic to help the woman to push forward.
And just a plea, it's not just women, it's people of color. And
Yes.
I don't think there's anybody here in this room.
But
And it's,
absolutely.
you know, we have all kinds of social advantages. We may be women and face some of the problems we're discussing. But I think it's incumbent on us to look, unlike the men, perhaps, the white dudes, to actually look more broadly and bring along a lot of other people who are not necessarily in the social circles we run with, whether it's golf or simply where you take your kids to after school.
I think that's terribly important, and I'm trying to do that in my investing, but please send people to me.
I wanted to ask, in your experience, how do you be a champion for other women or other people of color or diversity in your community? Because there's one sort of theory of change that is just you need to be the leader, right? You need to demonstrate excellence, which you all have. And then there's another, which is you see a problem in your community, or you see maybe actions that have been taken that are all of a sudden going the wrong way. You know, we were talking the other night, there actually used to be a lot of increase in gender balance across even this conference. It's actually gone down now. And so how, you know, you say you invest strategically in women. Are there other types of strategies that you might promote for being a champion without being seen as like the prickly person who's just causing problems and you should just act as a leader?
Absolutely. I'm just holding the microphone, so I'm going to hand it off. But I think it's terribly important. I mean, in my investing, I have a philosophy about it. But I'm straight, but I always try to eat in restaurants that are run by women or where the chef is a woman. I mean, you can't do it exclusively, and you can't be a pain about it. But I think in every part of your daily life, you know, I go to a dentist who's African American. I mean, I think to the extent that you can lead by example, it's only small, it's one thing at a time. I do think you can have an effect, but I don't want to monopolize this thing.
Well, maybe we'll go back to some questions and comments at the, oh, Robin?
I just wanted to say that there is a National Academy of Sciences very rigorous study on implicit bias towards women. And so I think this whole room should take a look at it so you can actually say, no, this is really what's going on out there scientifically. And one of the things was just on women's performance reviews, 70% of women are accused of being overly aggressive. 1% of men ever get that comment on their performance review. There's also studies on resumes
happening, this is what's happening.
Can I add to that? In the investment community, the reason 2 to 3% of women founders are funded is because of this same implicit bias. Same thing with people of color. It's even lower for people of color. It's not that they do not have, they don't have good ideas. It's not that they don't have the experience. It's not that they can't put the team together. It's not that they can't execute. It's that they can't get the capital. And they can't get the capital because people tend to invest in people who are most like them, who they feel comfortable with, and who maybe they know people in their circle. So implicit bias is the biggest problem, and I would be interested to hear if the panel has anything to say about how one counters implicit bias.
But I want to point out that women are guilty of implicit bias. We are part of the. But the numbers show that we are just as guilty. So what's going on here? That you were saying that women are somehow seen to be less competent than. And
They're seen as less competent. I think they're less funded. The math, the statistics show women are funded at a much lower rate than men, and people of color are funded at an even lower rate.
right.
And they've looked at every angle of that, including performance. And by the way, women found.
But isn't that because they're viewed to be less competent?
I don't
Yep.
think it is. I think it's an implicit bias around doing business with people who are most like you.
Okay.
I actually don't think it's I don't think you're competent. Although it's possible that the implicit bias is around competence. It's possible. But that is not what the research shows. There's a study out by, what's her name? She did a study, she's a VC in the East Bay, and she invests partly in women-led companies. Thank you. And her firm did a study through Cal of why women are not being funded. And they did performance and they did bias. And in both cases, they found the performance is higher and the bias is greater against them than for them.
Right, so like the
Performance is
performance is
better.
actually higher,
Their
but
performance is better, but they're funded at a
perception of the performance is lower.
Well, I don't know about the assumption of the performance. That wasn't really what the study said. What the study said is that they really didn't have a good reason why they weren't investing in them. They did not have a unified reason. They did not have a consistent reason. They just weren't investing in them. So that sounds like implicit bias to me.
Well, I think we can go too far on what these particular words mean, but as an investor, my default is no. And so when you ask someone, why did you reject something, they won't give you an answer because their default is no. The reason they do invest is, oh yeah, this guy reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg. I know someone told me that once. And I don't look like Mark Zuckerberg. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated why people say yes and why people say no to writing a check. I don't think it's a simple thing, but if you look at the industry overall, it's not about one person saying no, or it's about the whole industry. When 2 to 3% of all startups are funded, are led by women, that are funded are led by women, that tells you that there's a bias in there somewhere. And I just am interested in what thoughts you have about how you counter that.
Success speaks. I mean, be successful is one way to do it, right? Get out there, tell your story, tell it often, and tell it well. And I mean, I can just say I had to do that for my career. There was plenty of roadblocks along the way, but I too don't suffer from that gene of needing to please people. That's one thing I suggest that we try to get rid of. That constant desire to make everyone happy is the biggest single roadblock to success.
I just have an anecdote along the lines of this discussion, which is, so I work for a nonprofit. I run a nonprofit. We empower millennial and Gen Z-led startups around the world that tackle food and ag challenges. So we have a lot of science startups in there. But getting funding is sometimes difficult because we're working with young people in emerging economies, you know, on early stage startups. And we were applying for some meetings with big ag companies. And when I signed my emails as Christine, I was getting no's or no replies. When I signed them as Chris, I got yeses. And I never clarified, but what showed up at the meeting, you know, I'm Christine, yeah. So I just think think it's an interesting anecdote, you know, and maybe it's a game we can play. I don't know, but I just took that as like, all right, I'll play the game and I'll let them, whatever, come in with their perception of who I am and, you know, get the replies that I need. And it got me the meetings, so.
I think we have some comments there in the back.
I just have one thing. So I think this is a global problem, right? It's not just this industry or this place, or like we talked about, it's gender, it's ethnic diversity. It's a lot of challenges, and it's a global issue in terms of community and society. You can look at, there's a bunch of studies in the UN that looks at this every year. There are some really interesting studies about how you can design processes for outcomes so that lead to more gender equality. There's one book I just read this summer, which is why it's coming out. It's Iris Bonet, is the author. She's at Harvard, I believe, and she's done a lot of this stuff around behavioral economics and studies around just gender specifically. And it's a wonderful book. It has a lot of just very practical, data-driven, sort of scientific approaches to how to just like design your life and the way you do things in your life to cause change in people's behavior. I think instead, it's really easy because it feels so personal and it's terrible the way things are looking today. It's what works, gender design or something like that. Yeah, I have it on my Kindle, so come see me later. But to me, that seems, it's easy to get so emotional, and especially then you talk to bigger communities, it gets defensive, and it's so hard not to do that. But if you can sort of separate that piece and just make it a science problem or a technical problem, an engineering problem, maybe we have a chance of changing the world. So I'm trying to draw from that a lot when I'm looking at processes and interacting with different groups, and maybe that works for you guys.
I'll just add to that. I think this approach is more let somebody or maybe even yourself design community and society to do that. But I think really everybody should start with yourself, right? I think very often we say, oh, why there is no environment? Why they built in this? We blame these people. But really, it's up to you, right? Like you go and you fight, and sure, yeah, maybe in these conditions you have to put more effort. But so what? You know, like you either get it or you don't. It's one of the things. But I think a lot of people just rely too much on somebody else solving the problem. And they say, oh, well, if you give me the direction, I may do that. It really should start with yourself. And in a way, I look at it more, it's, you know, it's a fun game, right? Like, sure, somebody maybe have more cards, but I have new cards, and I can play them. And let me play it the way that I do. And, you know, somebody said before, like, oh, women are, they have to be more intelligent, better than men. I don't think so. I think you only have to have one quality that's better, and you go with that quality. And, you know, the other things that you're not as great, people just don't notice.
That's great. Thank you for your inputs. You know, on you know, just to chime in here, I mean, on my part, like Una said, you know, Mints organizes a diversity event and a promotion of you know, women every year. And so that's something we do in the Bay Area. Una was one of my panelists last week, and it's something that I encourage for those of you all in the Bay Area to be part of, because again, it's part of a ecosystem and a community that we're building here. You know, maybe this is a great topic for next year's panel, you know, when we do Women in Synthetic Biology again. So it's been, you know, really good input from everyone. I think we have maybe 10 minutes left, so you know, maybe we'll just kind of move on. And you know, one of the questions that we've talked about is what's the role of academics in synthetic biology? And I think this is for you, Frances.
I see two roles. One is to explore the new ideas that may lay the foundations for the next revolution. And the other is people, right? Training the scientists and the entrepreneurs of the next generation. And at Caltech, I'm lucky to be able to participate in both of that. I'm very proud of the technology that we've developed, but I'm even more proud of the generations of young people who have had an enormous impact in synthetic biology and other industries. And to minimize that encouragement of young people is really to waste the huge opportunity that academics has.
I mean, all I can do is just applaud that. I mean, it's the research and it's the people. But there's one more thing that I would love to see academics do more and louder and perhaps better, and that is educate the public and the press. I mean, the public is so woefully uninformed about synthetic biology, for example, but about most of our exciting new technologies. They're just afraid of them. And those of us who are in the industry or investors are considered evil and black hat people, whereas I think academics are still white hat honest brokers. So I would love I would love to see more outreach to the press and to the public on what we're all doing.
Where do you find time to do that?
Well, we don't get any credit for doing that.
Exactly.
Zero.
That's something that I love to do,
Yeah.
but how do you get credit for it?
You don't.
It's such an important thing. So how do we change this?
In fact, there's
What credit
anti-credit.
do you want?
But just time to do it as an academic. Yeah.
Okay. But time, but also credibility. Academics are notorious for. Well, no, we need publications and money. We need lots and lots of money. Yes, we have a bottomless hunger for that. But we don't have a bottomless hunger to be in this publication or explain this thing to people because there's very little credit given. Tenure is not based on that. In fact, there's anti-credit if you're perceived as being too out there in the public sphere versus paying attention. So you have to come up with some way to make that valuable. So what do I tell my students? I say, look, you're a storyteller because you will not get funded in this hyper-competitive environment unless you can go out and tell a story that will capture people's imaginations. And it may be your funding agent, it may be other scientists. But unless you can tell your story to at least that group, you haven't got a chance. Once you learn how to tell a story, it becomes fun. And I personally just absolutely love to talk about my science to high school level audiences and all over the world. I enjoy that, but I can do it because I can do anything I want now. If I've got tenure. But you don't necessarily get tenure by doing that.
What is coming through to me, sort of we're talking, whether it's in SynBio or whatever, this is a thread that runs through everything. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, well, I've been a fundraiser in my life. I started a symphony, right? We had to go knocking on doors, nothing existed. We had to tell a story. And if you go to fundraising school, that's what they teach you, how to tell your story. So sometimes the obstacles are not real as big as we think. We just don't know the mechanisms that we need to have impact. And if you're in another industry or where this is the thing you do, they're teaching you those things. They're telling you what's going to have impact, where you're going to get these things from. So I'm just hearing some of this and thinking, well, it happens in the nonprofit world the same as it is, and how are we lucky to get money that they don't get any return from? So I think that's amazing, they give it to us and it goes into a bottomless pit, and they get no return. But hopefully we're doing societal return, obviously. I mean, that's what the nonprofit world is doing. But we're up against the same kinds of challenges in our own way.
I wonder if there's something more fundamental about science and engineering and the way that we understand it and who does it and what it is, right? So earlier in your conversation or in your remarks, you kept bringing up these really important aspects of what it means to do science in the real world, how to build these things and make an impact. So you're talking about communication, you're talking about the people stuff, right? You're talking about the social fabric and framework that you need to build. You're talking about ethics, policy, regulation. All of those things are feminized and they're the girl stuff. It's not the real science often. And the scientist, trained as a scientist, we're told not to focus on those things, right? That's not what's going to get you tenure. It's not what you need to write a paper. But it's so important to building something in the world. And I wonder if that the gender dynamic or the perception of those things as gendered is also a fundamental problem, part of the sort of structural problem and the systemic problem that we're diagnosing in this conversation. And how can we make a system where we do have
change the incentives so that the type of real world science that actually teams with women, are good at can be better incentivized, allowed to flourish within our universities, within our companies and elsewhere. I think there's things we can do together.
Well, I, for one, am pretty competitive and have been a little bit successful, and all of my science is done by teams. And I learned that early on, that by hiring women and distributing women, not just the top women, but women who help other people. There's a real value to having that there, and that brought up the quality. Well, first of all, it improved everyone's experience in graduate school, which is highly stressful. And it brought up the quality of everybody's work. And now the culture in my lab, and you can ask Tina, everyone helps everyone. And we are hyper competitive with the rest of the world, but inside, everyone feels like nobody's going to steal their ideas. They can go to somebody with a bad idea and come back with a better idea. They can help each other with learning things, and it works beautifully. If that's the way it is, that will take over. I'm a Darwinian. Whatever is successful will take over. And I think that the men who, or women who run groups where there's a lot of internal competition, they're not going to succeed, not in this environment.
I wonder too, like as a Darwinian, there's natural selection, but there's also artificial selection.
Yes.
And so I think that's something that hasn't come up in the conversation, but there are like things that people are like, yeah, there's explicit discrimination. there's sexual harassment that's pushing people out of these pipelines. There's all of these forces that are like stopping those things from happening. And so I guess like are those things that you all of you have been super successful. Like how have you had to experience that? How do you thwart that? So like how do you now like in your positions where you are like how can you like to pave the way for others?
Well, you can only do what you can do. I mean, if you took all of the wealth in this room, we're not actually immediately going to change some of the statistics. But I do what I try to do as much as I can. And all the companies that I've led had at least 51% women in them, but they did not completely eliminate some of the issues that you're talking about. So that's just life. People behave badly. But I think that as we sort of summarize where we are on this panel, I think when we do rule the world, as we will, we have to be very thoughtful about this wonderful, diverse, inclusive culture that we have, how we will not make the same mistakes that we dislike in men, how we will in fact have men critique what we do, have all genders part of what we do. And I think something that's sort of overlooked in science and business in general is just kindness. Be nice to people. And I think then the cream does rise. But, you can only do what you can do. I used to try to think that I could cure all the diseases of the world and go into global health. I mean, I worked on the Millennium Development Goals for maternal and child care and thought that was a very noble thing to do. I come back here and look at Silicon Valley, and we haven't even dealt with the Millennium Development Goal of gender equality. So I mean, there are a lot of battles to be won, but you do what you can do, and we all have to do it.
Can we do more together?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
I think a lot of thread has been about what we can do as individuals, but there's a lot of firepower in this room.
Well, why don't we start a SynBioBeta fund?
I was saying, the only thing I would add is it's an intention, right? We have to set every day with the intention that's what we're either going to work together, and that goes against our tendency when we have somebody we don't really like over here, or, we're in competition with. Oh, I like you better, you don't like Watson. So I think that we have to come at it with a real intention, and that goes against some of our instincts, And we suffer the same way, and so whether it is hiring, whether it's hiring, whether it's boards or whatever it is, it's taking a check of our own biases too, and just being very intentional and sort of checking in with ourselves. What are we doing? And being kind, and all of those things. Sometimes when we're busy and we get caught up in what we're all trying to accomplish, that kind of goes out the window. I mean, start with a smile. If you walk down the street, you see nobody smiles, the first thing you do is connect. So it's silly things, and we always think we have to change so much. But if we change just little things, then there's a cascade effect. So that's what I would say for that.
All right, so I think we're to the end of our hour, but I really, please join me in thanking our panelists. And, thank you, everybody. We should definitely, all just stay connected and, hopefully see you guys next year at this time. Right? Thank you, everybody.